Hello and welcome to Better Workdays, a show dedicated to helping everyday professionals create better days at work. I'm your host, Andy Morrison from Real Custom Training, where we design and deliver professional development workshops that are relevant, engaging, actionable, and lasting. Each week on Better Workdays, we'll be taking a look at a specific concept, skill, or story that we use in our workshops. We'll make sure that they're easy to understand, fun to learn about, and most importantly, that they can be applied immediately in the workplace as soon as you finish the episode. Thank you for joining us. It's time for Better Workdays from Real Custom Training. Hey everyone, welcome back to Better Workdays. I'm your host, Andy Morrison from Real Custom Training, where we help companies develop leaders at all levels. Now, if you're like me, you're back at work this week after a week off for the July 4th holiday. And if you're also like me, it means you've got young kids and that you probably took some kind of trip with them, right? In my case, we went to the happiest place on earth, Santa's Village, up in the White Mountains in New Hampshire. I'll have a special Santa's Village episode coming up for you because honestly, if you're going to try to create better work days, sometimes that means you got to get the hell out of work for a while and create some good days outside of work. That's going to help you create better work days when you get back. And that's what I want to look at this week is what tool could I help provide for everybody that can help you reframe your mindset, help you kind of get back into the groove, as they say, when you come back from a vacation. And especially if you're in a leadership role or if you aspire to be a leader in the workplace, because leadership is influence, all right? Especially intentional influence. You know, when we say leadership, there's a good connotation there. Good leaders are intentionally influential. You don't have to have a leadership role, a formal leadership role, in order to be intentionally influential, do you? No, you definitely don't. So anybody can be a leader in the workplace. That's why we say we develop leaders at all levels. But no matter what your role is, if you want to be a leader in the workplace, it starts with mindset. We've talked about that before. And sometimes you've got to reframe your mindset, or as I like to say, you've got to kickstart it. All right. You got to kick it into gear and get yourself going. And that's what we're going to talk about this week. I have 4 steps for you to kickstart your leadership mindset when you get back to work from what hopefully was a great week off. That's what we'll be talking about this week on Better Workdays. Now, 4 steps to kickstart your leadership mindset. We are borrowing this concept from this source, all right? Here's the giant whose shoulders we're standing on this week. Robert E. Quinn wrote an article in Harvard Business Review, July 2005. 2005, I was thinking I was young back then, but I guess relatively, I was 20. I was thinking I was a kid, but no, I was 20 years old. And that was almost 20 years ago. That is insane. But 20 years ago, all right, when Andy Morrison was what the hell was I doing? I think I lived in California 20 years ago. When I was in California, being a production assistant, Bobby Quinn was writing this article and getting it published in HBR. Moments of Greatness, Entering the Fundamental State of Leadership. And I'm adapting it a little bit. What he calls the fundamental state of leadership, I'm calling the leadership mindset. Because I think if you set your mindset into that kind of leadership mode, it's going to help you function better at work. So we're borrowing from Bobby Quinn here, from his article, Moments of Greatness, Entering the Fundamental State of Leadership. If you don't happen to have the July 2005 edition of Harvard Business Review sitting around, you can get that article and 9 other great articles. Well, I guess actually 10 other great articles because there's a bonus one. I'm holding up the book for you guys on the stream. It's on managing yourself. It's a collection from HBR's series of 10 must-reads. So this has 10 what they consider must-read articles on the topic of managing yourself, one of which is Moments of Greatness, which is a tremendous article. If you like what you hear today, go get that article, do a deeper dive into it. But here's a quick overview for you, and I'll make it nice and actionable for you. All right, pulling from Quinn's work. So there's 4 steps to kickstart your leadership mindset, and it's asking yourself 4 questions. You can do it mentally. You can do it with pen and paper. You can do it as comprehensively as you feel like you need to. But ask yourself these questions when you feel like maybe your mindset needs a little bit of a kickstart to get more into leadership mode. Question number 1, what result do I want to create? Got to be result-oriented if you're going to be a leader, okay? Because again, if you're a leader and you're trying to have influence, What are you trying to influence? That's the result that you're looking to create. So by starting with that, by keeping in mind, it's kind of like Covey says in 7 Habits of Effective Leaders, begin with the end in mind, right? This is similar. What result do I want to create? What's the ending I'm trying to get to? What's the better future I'm trying to create? Start there. Start with that question to kickstart your leadership mindset. Question 2, am I following my core values? Now, maybe you're saying, Andy, I don't know what my core values are. No shame there. All right. A lot of people don't. In fact, I could do some more work on my core values. I know the core values for the business are that adult learning should be relevant, engaging, actionable, and lasting. That's my organizational core values, but I actually could do some work on identifying my personal core values more. That's a leadership. That's a beginner's leadership thing to do. Establishing what your core values are, because then when you ask yourself, am I following my core values? You're going to be able to answer yes or no. Let's say one of your core values is treating people with respect, and you're wrestling with whether or not to deliver some negative feedback, some critical feedback to an employee. Okay. If you ask yourself this question, by delaying giving them this feedback, am I following my core values? Well, one of my values is respect for all people. The most respectful thing to do in this case would be deliver this feedback to the person so it can help them. So I guess I better get my butt in gear and deliver that feedback. All right. So figuring out what your core values are and then making sure you're following them. That's the second way to trigger your leadership mindset. The third question you want to ask yourself to start operating in your leadership mindset: am I acting in the collective best interest? Are you doing things for yourself, or are you doing them for other people? And not just other people, selective other people. Are you doing them for the common good? All right. At work, we would say, are you doing it for the betterment of the organization, the collective best interest? I've talked to managers who have had to let employees go that they personally liked a lot. Okay. But for the sake of the organization, for the sake of the rest of the team, the person's performance or the mistakes they made just couldn't be tolerated anymore without being a detriment to that greater good. So in a case like that, if the boss is wrestling with, geez, I don't want to let Andy go, everybody really loves him, but X, Y, and Z, yada, 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 that boss could ask themselves, am I acting in the collective best interest by keeping Andy on? And if the answer is no, then that's going to help push him in the right direction. And this is the benefit of engaging this leadership mindset. It gives you the map, gives you the roadmap to follow for your next steps, for your action steps. And then the fourth one, am I considering feedback? So let's stick with that example of you're not sure, you've got an employee that you might need to let go. All right. We all tend to wrestle with our own thoughts on things, right? It's human nature. If you're wrestling with whether to let Andy go, make sure you've got feedback other than your own about Andy. You know, if you're worried about the effect on the rest of the team, have you gotten feedback from the rest of the team that confirms your suspicion that Andy's performance or behavior is having a detrimental effect on the rest of the team? So basically, don't operate in a vacuum. You have to be open to feedback from people, and when appropriate, factoring that feedback into your decision making. Now, why are these 4 questions the key to kickstarting your leadership mindset? Well, from Quinn's work, Quinn calls this positive human influence, which I love, because leadership is influence. It's intentional influence. And as they put it, positive human influence. I think that's a nice way to describe leadership. It's you're trying to have a positive influence on your fellow humans. And there's 4 core qualities to that, okay, in order to have positive human influence or to be a positive human leader. Quinn's 4 qualities are that leaders need to be result focused, okay? You can't be comfort focused. Comfort is going to keep you from delivering that critical feedback to an employee. Comfort is going to keep you from firing Andy or disciplining Andy because you're more comfortable not doing it. But once you switch, you ask yourself that question, what result do I want to create? That gets you result focused. That gets you thinking and operating more like a leader when you realize, well, yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable to terminate Andy. He's probably going to cry. I'm probably going to cry, but we've got to do it. Okay. We've got to do it. All right. You get result oriented. Quinn says leaders are also internally directed, meaning their core values are driving them, largely driving them in their decision making. Whereas being externally directed means your compass isn't your own. It's your employees that are pulling your strings. It's the other bosses that are pulling your strings. You're doing everything to try to satisfy what you perceive as these external expectations of you. All right. And you're not being internally driven. You're just doing it to seek external validation. That's not, according to Quinn, true leadership. True leaders need to be internally directed. And you can make sure you're operating in an internally directed way by asking yourself that second question. What are my core values, and am I following them? The third core part of positive human influence, according to Quinn, is being other focused. That means basically you're not focused on yourself, you're focused on other people. A good test of this for new supervisors, and I get caught up in this too, because I'm someone who, loves a flashy title. Did you want to become a supervisor because you like having the title? You like maybe the prestige that you feel comes with it? You think it's like you're a big shot being a manager? That's all self-focused stuff. Or maybe you're only excited to be making more money. You're kind of only thinking about it in terms of how it's going to benefit you. Whereas good leaders are other focused, which might mean, yeah, you like the title. You certainly like more money. We all like more money. But at the end of the day, what are you mostly driven by? You're driven by being focused on other people, which means, yes, I'm excited to be a new supervisor because I want to be the best supervisor for these other people that I can possibly be. Or I want to help this department continue to kick ass in the work that they're doing. You're focused on other people. You're focused on them more than yourself. Not to suggest you're ever going to be entirely selfless. You got to take care of yourself too, but it's about focus. Which way is that scale tipping? That's another thing Quinn says that I loved. He says good leaders are tipping the scale toward excellence, tipping it. It's not stacked against it. You're not going to be excellent 100% of the time, but at the end of the day, the majority of the time, are you helping to make sure it's tipping towards excellence? Being other focused helps with that. And then lastly, externally open. Are you externally open? You're asking yourself, am I incorporating feedback? That's what it means to be externally open. Seek out and utilize feedback. Very difficult for a lot of leaders. Why? Well, because no one likes to give the boss tough feedback. It's a simple fact of life, and there's studies that back it up. The higher up you go in an organizational hierarchy, the harder it is for you to get good, honest feedback. And good, honest feedback sometimes hurts. It's things like, hey, Andy, you're a bit of a suck up. Anyone ever tell you that? All right, I've gotten that feedback from work friends who were really, busting my balls, but that's good feedback to say, oh, geez, now that someone puts it to me like that, I can see how I come across as a bit of a suck up. You got to be open to that feedback. It's your employees aren't going to proactively give it to you. You got to make them feel safe, and you got to factor in that feedback. And especially if you're a leader making policy, making decisions that affect other people, then you definitely need to be externally open. Because being internally closed means that you are only concerned with your own thoughts, feelings, opinions on a certain matter. So if you've ever had bosses who make big decisions without considering the downstream effects, who it's going to impact, what it's going to look like for certain departments, we've all dealt with that. That's examples of leaders that weren't being externally open. They need to be open to external data, stimuli, feedback. They need to be factoring all of that into their decision making. So those are 4 traits of positive human leadership or positive human influence. You got to be result focused, internally directed, other focused, and externally open. And the 4 questions that we started the podcast with. Anytime you want to make sure you're operating within these 4 core traits of positive human influence, you can just ask yourself those 4 questions, and they're going to get you going in the right direction. Now, a little pop wisdom for you this week, all right? If we're looking at how to kickstart your leadership mindset, and we're looking at these 4 core traits of positive leadership, then I thought, let's look at one of my favorite movies. Let's take a look at one of the leaders that I like and see if they meet this criteria. So a couple weeks ago, I took my daughter, Haley, and we didn't go see all 3. All right. I'm ashamed to say we didn't go see all 3 of them, but we went to see The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Rings, and The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, the extended editions, the 4-hour-long ones. We went to see them in theaters a couple weeks ago, which was awesome. But I didn't have it. We just couldn't do the third Return of the King in theaters, which I'll regret for the rest of my life, and she'll never let me forget it either. But the first 2 in theaters were amazing. And If you're familiar with Lord of the Rings, let's talk about Gandalf. We'll just do a quick check. Does Gandalf check all these boxes to be a good leader, to have a good, positive human influence? Is he result focused? I would say certainly he is. He's looking out for all of Middle Earth, and the ultimate result they want, get that damn ring destroyed, right? Get Frodo to toss it into Mount Doom. So yeah, Gandalf is very much result focused. All of his actions throughout the movies are moving everybody towards that desired result. Is he internally directed? Is he following core values? Well, I would point to the part in the movie where Frodo is telling Gandalf that he wishes Bilbo had killed Gollum. And Gandalf is quick to say, whoa, Frodo, like, who are you to decide who gets to live and die? And that's a scene that really exemplifies Gandalf's got some core values. You know, he's focused on that result, but he's not going to abandon his core values along the way. No, if Frodo's acting like it's easy peasy deciding who lives and dies, Gandalf says, no, that's not fair. That's no way to go through life. He also says in that scene, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us, right? That's another core value of Gandalf. That's all about self-control, sphere of control and influence. You can't really control anything other than what you do with the time you're given. So yeah, I would certainly say Gandalf is internally directed. How about other focused? Yeah, I think he's other focused. I mean, heck, he shows up for Bilbo's 111th birthday party and he brings the fireworks for the kids. But no, again, I mean, just like being result focused, there's alignment you want to look for between the result you're striving for and whether it serves the collective good. All right. If your result serves the collective good and the best interest of all, or the best interest of the most possible people, then you can rest assured that you're being other focused as well. And finally, externally open. That's a tough one with Gandalf. You know, I can only think of the fact that he does not want to go through the mines of Moria, but he does leave it up to Frodo. He does get feedback from Aragorn and Boromir about whether or not they should even try to go through the mines. Yeah, I'll have to think more about externally open. I'm leaning towards yes for Gandalf, but that's a tougher one because he is kind of set in his ways. He's certainly not open to feedback from poor Pippin. He's such a jerk to Pippin throughout the movies, but Pippin sucks. I don't really blame Gandalf for that. But so just an example, right? If you want to watch a movie you love, you want to look at a leader, or even look at someone who fails as a leader. You can do it with movies. You can do it with work, right? We could easily take, let's take Kendall Roy from Succession. I wish I had a graphic keyed up, but I didn't think of it earlier. You could take Kendall Roy from Succession. All right. Succession spoiler, everybody. Stop listening if you don't want to be spoiled for Succession. I won't be able to live with myself if I spoil it for somebody. But Kendall doesn't become the leader in the end that he wants to be. In fact, the whole series is kind of about Kendall and the other kids failing as a leader. You could take Kendall Roy, run him through this. Is he result focused? Is he internally directed? Is he other focused? Is he externally open? No, 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 and no. All right. So when you're looking at leaders in your life who kick ass, who do a great job, and when you're looking at people in leadership roles who actually aren't great leaders, run them through these 4 scenarios, see how they stack up. And you're probably going to find, like we did with Gandalf and Kendall, the good ones, they are all of these things. The bad ones, they are none of these things. All right. And your action steps for this week. Take the 4 questions from the beginning of 4 questions. You can use them to reflect on your approach to a particular workplace challenge. Just do that, the reflection exercise. Take your challenge, reflect on your thinking surrounding that challenge, and ask yourself, am I result oriented? You know, what's the result that I want to drive? Am I following my core values? Okay. Am I incorporating feedback in my decision making? And am I acting in the interest of the collective good? Just answer those questions for yourself as they pertain to a specific workplace challenge. And then you tell me, I think you'll find it influences your next steps in a positive way, in a way that makes you feel like you're being a good leader. That's what I think you'll find if you use these 4 questions to kickstart your leadership mindset and apply them directly to a workplace challenge this week. Give it a go, and I think you'll like the results that you get. All right, well, thanks for listening, everybody. If you want to learn more about things like kickstarting your leadership mindset, you can join us for our Level Up Leadership program that we run here in Putnam, Connecticut. It's starting in September 2024, and we'll have 6 cohorts running through the new year. So plenty of opportunity to come train with us here in Putnam. You can visit realcustomtraining.com to learn more about the Level Up Leadership program. And I will be back next week with another episode of Better Workdays. Thanks for listening.